I was a Nintendo kid growing up. I mean, I played some Sega games. I have fond memories of spending an afternoon at the house of various friends and family members to marvel over Sonic the Hedgehog, Altered Beast, Art Alive, and of course, the ALF game.
Don't you have a lot of questions?
And I eventually got a console for myself in my early teens, enjoying older titles like Eternal Champions and Comix Zone when I wasn't exploring the wonder of Lunar Silver Star Story Complete or wasting my allowance on a rental of Earthworm Jim 64, but after that I didn't physically touch a Sega console again. I don't know if they fell out of my periphery, or we were all just more excited about what Sony was doing, or what. I mean, there's a reason Sega eventually became a third-party company. Just last episode, I played a Dreamcast game for the first time, the one before that we covered a Saturn title, and today we're looking at something from the 32X, which was sort of a hat you put on your Genesis so it could play better-looking games, thus completing the third bell of Sega's console death knell, if not in order. As for the game itself, this sci-fi fighter was rushed out the door to meet the console's launch and suffered for it. Now why does that sound familiar? I'm Eric J. Chucky, and welcome to Violent Profiles, where we discuss obscure fighting games and the rosters that define them. If the weird space aliens in this video get you as excited as they get me, why don't you show that by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel? It boosts the signal of our humble little show, so YouTube knows to broadcast it to more people, and view count is the sweet sustenance possums crave. Cosmic Carnage, also known as Cyber Brawl in Japan, dropped for the 32X's launch in 1994, and not a year later, developer Almanic Corporation changed their name to the Givro Corporation. Are these two facts connected? Probably not, but the less than stellar reception for this game couldn't have helped. Sega notoriously was even hesitant about shipping Cosmic Carnage, and in March of 1995, then president of Sega of America Tom Kalinske didn't even bother to stand up for the 4-month-old title, saying, well, you know, every now and then there are games with which we're not so happy. It's all part of the learning process. Sounds like a Violent Profiles game to me. The story is wonderfully simple. A shipload of criminals have hijacked a prison barge in order to escape a lifetime of hard labor as punishment for their transgressions, but in the process destroyed most of the ship's useful systems. Luring in a military freighter with a distress signal, they used the last of its fuel to ram into the freighter in hopes of commandeering it to finish their escape. Only this was a stupid plan by stupid criminals, and now the military ship is also wrecked. Life support systems aren't going to hold out forever, and there is in fact only one escape pod left intact, so the 8 remaining survivors battle for dibs on their only ticket out of here. I like this concept a lot, for 2 reasons. First, that it's just a good elevator pitch. This is a great action movie. This is a fantastic first season of a show. I don't even really care who the characters are. Sight unseen, this sounds cool. Bunch of folks stuck in a place they don't want to be stuck in, gotta fight each other to get out. It's like the 2005 Doom movie without pretending to be about Doom. The second reason is that it's not pretending to be a tournament either. So many fighting games call their premise a tournament when it almost never is. Hell, I've done it before on this very series. But there are almost never any brackets, and certainly no round-robin structure. It's just the character you pick against the rest of the roster one after another. Even a game as recent as Mortal Kombat 1 pretends to have a tournament in the first act of its story mode and just hopes you don't care enough to wonder why the other fights that had to have taken place are never addressed. This style of multi-person battle is called a gauntlet.
Green Wizard needs food badly.
Yeah, that might be why we never used the term in the first place, but I'm just pleased that they aren't trying to shoehorn in the concept into Cosmic Carnage, as though before settling their differences through bloodshed, these folks sat down and seeded the first round matches between one another. Gameplay is pretty straightforward, with light and heavy punch and kick, 2 taunts, and all throws accomplished via command grab inputs they call contact moves. The most unique element comes into play if you choose one of the 4 characters from the military ship. These fighters have optional armor you can add in 3 pieces that augment your normals and modify what special moves you have available. That's really cool. You can crouch walk, there are proper launchers, guard cancels, and juggle combos. The game doesn't even control very poorly. It's a little stiff, but you get used to it after playing for a bit. There aren't any proper fatalities, but depending on how you finish the round, your opponent might explode in gory detail, and there are a few different versions of this as well. The graphics overall are smooth and delightful, with a lot of frames to most of the animations. In particular, I like how they make limbs and stuff larger as they get closer to the screen. So if I have so much good to say about the game, where's the problem? Why didn't it do well? The short answer is mediocrity. As I said, the game was rushed to launch, and as a result, there's nothing that really sets it apart from its peers, aside from an armor system on only half the characters. My typical complaints of chip damage and cross-ups being absent are present, though honestly you have so many options to damage your enemy from other angles, and the AI doesn't turtle very hard, so it's not as egregious as I'd usually insist. Most of the reviews at the time were even along the lines of 3 out of 5 stars, which might not be a terrible score, but when your contemporaries are Killer Instinct and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, that's not good enough. And then there's the little matter of, have you figured out I'm stalling yet?
You know, one thing I should... Excuse me for 1 second.
Of course.
I mentioned this briefly last episode, but this season of Violent Profiles has been plagued by poor planning and clumsy tech, a problem for which I have no one to blame but myself and general misfortune.
Fortune doesn't favor fools.
This is the 8th episode of the season and the 6th I've had to pivot topics for. Sometimes it was because I didn't realize the game was Japanese only and I wouldn't be able to provide an accurate summary of the characters. Other times I couldn't get the emulation software to work and didn't want to cover a game I couldn't actually play. The Gokitsuji series will remain the only exception to these two issues because I am committed to exploring it all, and there are so many games involved that it takes very precise planning. So, after the last time this happened, I sat down with my spreadsheet of planned Violent Profiles episodes. Yes, I have a spreadsheet with all the games I plan on covering, in addition to ones I'd like to try to cover if I can get the software to cooperate.
That's it?
No.
And poured several hours of frustrated effort into checking to make sure I could run the games I had my eye on, that they had English releases and preferably manuals or well-documented information online. Then I sat down and started to work on today's original topic, realized it was a Saturn game that I don't know how to emulate, pivoted to my backup and discovered that the in-game bios wouldn't be counted as a paragraph by my high school English teacher, and the game only has 2 extremely brief generic endings.
But you can't do this to me.
You know how much I sacrificed?
There's not even a writer credit on this one. I mean, none of the designers are credited for any specific job at all, but if one of them was hired with the sole purpose of crafting a script, they certainly conned Sega out of a regular paycheck for a while. But you know what? In spite of it all, we're gonna soldier on and cover Cosmic Carnage anyway, because I have already fallen in love with these character designs, because I think more people need to know about this little game that almost could have been good, and because I really, really don't want to have to figure out another episode. I got deadlines, man. Let's start with the most boring person on the roster, and when the character who fits that description looks like this, you've got to be doing something right. Tyr is the guy who designs weapons and armor for the military ship's inhabitants, but saves the best bits back for himself. If these are his best designs, I'm gonna guess the guy's really into old school Eldor.
Rock the rainbow, taste the rainbow.
His specials are a little awkward, and one of them is called Breast Charger. I understand the intent of him throwing his body weight around to do damage from a design standpoint, but it doesn't play very elegantly in the game's engine. His unarmored normals aren't much better, but when he is wearing armor, they are punishing. Being as we don't have much to go by for character personalities, I'm going to try to interpret what I can from their look, fighting style, and taunts. Tyr strikes me as kind of a jolly, boisterous fellow, like the Greek god Hephaestus is often portrayed in modern media. He likes to flex his arms and smile and bare his chest to an opponent. That's a hard man right there. A real hero's hero. In the Japanese version of the game, all but one of the characters' names were altered, and 3 of them had tweaks to their sprites to appear more human. Tyr, for example, becomes Carl. I think that's a fine name for this character. Naja might be my favorite fighter on the roster. Known in Japan as Stayray, this gigantic snake woman with a robotic lower half terminating in a pincer blade tipped tail has no legs, so she just batters you with her huge body, including flying through the air in a serpentine arc and squeezing the ever-loving pulp out of you with her command grab. She has some good normals, and I like her taunts. One is sort of a flirty pose, which is fitting as the manual calls her a siren, and the other is a literal Naga the Serpent laugh. She is the best. And I mean, come on. Snake in a bikini. What's not to love? The ninja-like Naruto is the only fighter with the same name in both versions of the game, though in Japan they decided to make him human instead of some kind of shadowy smoke monster. I'm categorically against this change, as I feel like there weren't enough shadowy smoke monsters wearing thongs in the 90s, and Naruto is here filling this niche. As one of the members of the military ship, he can don various pieces of armor to alter his attacks, one of them giving him access to a decent uppercut move with elbow blades, but his best special is his unarmored Naruto slice move, where he flash cuts his opponent with a hidden katana. Other than that, you get a lot of flip kicks. Makes sense. Naruto's taunts are about as ninja-y as you'd expect from, everything else about him, though he does have this Reaper-esque shrug that looks particularly cocky in human form.
I could do better.
If you double tap left or right on the D-pad, he can dash, which is cool. He can even air dash, which is extremely cool, especially for the time. Feels like there's maybe something else I could say about Naruto, the brightly colored ninja, but, I honestly can't think of anything. Tallmac, as you might expect, has quite a pair of stems on him. Built like a basketball player or your average Muay Thai kickboxer, Tallmac is a fugitive with razor claws and a skeletal visage that is speculated might be his actual face, though nobody has gotten close enough to find out and survived. I detect an air of smug confidence from his taunts, and with his low projectile, uppercut, and knee strike, he does kind of remind me of Sagat from Street Fighter. Maybe he is supposed to be doing Muay Thai. In Japan, he's called Bolt. That's lame. Silic isn't as cool as I wanted from a bug man. Maybe it's because he's more man than bug, so much so that they swap his head out in Cyber Brawl to make him a human named Jake. He feels the closest to a Shoto clone with a very similar set of normals, a fireball, Shoryuken style uppercut, and mid-air flying tornado kicks scattered between his armored and unarmored forms. But he also has the Energy Thunder attack, which functions like a crappy version of Blanca's electricity field, as well as a projectile smasher and a psycho crusher. I'm not getting much personality from his poses. He seems like a very serious, task-oriented fighter. Maybe part of the reason I didn't care for Silic is I was up against Yug when I played as him. This gorilla-like cyborg has a very awkward command grab choke that requires more precise button timing than any other moves, but his most obnoxious attack is the Zangief-like spinning double striker lariat. You basically just have to sit there and block until he gets tired of doing it, which is one thing for my weak arthritic human hands, but the AI just whips it out whenever it pleases, usually when I'm jumping into attack. Yug is called Wishbone in Japan, and respectfully, no, he is not. Wishbone is a cute doggy who tells me about classic literature, so I don't actually have to read it. This pretender can instead be known as Janky Kong. Having the unfortunate distinction of being a less cool version of Killer Instinct's Cinder when the man himself was ruling arcade, Xena Lon is a somewhat Chun-Li inspired character right down to the hyphen. She has a lightning kick style rapid fire punch and a single twist of the spinning bird kick in her unarmored form. A very leg-focused offense otherwise, and even performs a version of the Yatta V for Victory pose. She has all the speed I feel Naruto probably should have possessed, and you definitely feel that traded for power in her armored form. She also gets a better version of Silic's energy field, as well as a decent charge, but it's no match for Tallmac's impressive bullet punch, as you can see, or her own flying spinning lariat. Like the other military crew, Xenalon gets a human head and flameless body in the Japanese version, where her name is Rei. I envision her as a serious but youthful soldier, tough and well respected, but enthusiasm bubbles up out of her now and then, leading to some of her more high energy animations. Finally, there's Demon, or as he's known in Japan, Finisher. Neither of these names are great, especially with an impeccable design like this. Clearly inspired by H.R. Giger's Alien with a dash of Predator and a color palette like you let a 6-year-old go nuts with a pack of markers all over him, Demon is on the quicker side, which I like. But neither his normal nor specials feel as good as Notch's. He's still one of the better fighters on the roster. I appreciate him making liberal use of the scorpion stinger thing on the back of his head. Nice touch. And that's it. There's no bosses. I'll let the two endings play in the background. You can see they're nothing special, and the only thing that changes depending on who you play is your character's head in the corner. If you beat the game in under 20 minutes, you get the good ending, and if you don't, you don't. It's interesting to note that in the Japanese version, the story is a bit different. Both ships are neutral parties who just happen to hyperspace jump to the exact same spot at the exact same time, waking both crews from cryostasis to deal with the disaster. Still only one escape pod and a time limit on getting out of Dodge. Maybe that's why the factions changed from military and convicts to humans and aliens? These alterations were built after the original version we got in the Western release, but they weren't some pivot done in response to poor reception. You can access the other version of the game with a simple code input on boot. I also find it strange which region got which game. I would have expected America to have all the humans and Japan the more monstrous roster. Intriguing. What? What do you want?
Say the line, Bart!
Oh, right. It's a shame this game didn't get a better shot at doing what it set out to do. There are some really compelling ideas here. From the story to the character designs to the armor system, it's not even like the gameplay is bad, but there's just not enough polish and luster here to fill in all the cracks of rushed development. Maybe with more fleshed out bios, unique endings, adding in some character quotes between fights or something, it could have been special. Oh well. Next time on Violent Profiles, let's keep riding the jank train with a notorious multi-platform title and returning character from an earlier episode this season. Until then, if you want to hit up our Patreon at the $5 tier, you could join the honored list of names currently on screen and get episodes of this show a month early. Patreon money is how I buy video games, you see, and given that's what this show is about, it literally helps support me creating more content. Until next time, white out.